Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, home of these aggressive tiger bass, as well as a variety of other wildlife, including a pair of bald eagles, and this past week we found out they built a nest about 200 yards away from the pond, and we're excited to say they've got 2 baby eaglets in there right now. More on that in just a minute, but today we're going to be talking about pond and fish management. The first few years after you get that pond built and all the fish stocked are pretty easy going. You just make sure the bass have plenty to eat and avoid water quality issues. But around year 3, after that third successful spawn, that's when you've got to start taking some preventative measures to keep the pond from getting overpopulated with bass. So typically people will stock 50 to 75 bass per acre, and we added around 360 of these little 2-inch aggressive tiger bass. And that's on the lower end of the stocking rates, and that's because we wanted to ensure that those initial bass weren't competing against each other for food. And that plan worked out just as expected. We had some bass reach 5 pounds in just 2 years. But here's the catch. A big female bass like this can lay 10,000 eggs in a single spawning season. And so if you don't stay on top of things, your pond can become overcrowded really quick. But as you all know, we keep a database of all the bass in our pond. We've tagged every fish that we caught and documented its weight and length each time we catch it. But one of the key numbers in this database is the column that's called relative weight. And the relative weight table was made up by fisheries biologists. When a bass reaches a certain length in inches, it should weigh what's stated right there in that highlighted column. If it weighs more than that, it's over 100%, and if it weighs less than that, it's less than 100%. And our relative weights have been good the first few years, mostly staying above 100%. And so anytime you see those numbers dropping into the 90s or 80s, you know it's time to start harvesting and taking some bass out of the pond. And with the 5-acre pond, something really unusual happened in the fall of 23, as we had mild temperatures and we had a fall bass spawn. And as I was walking the pond banks in January, there were dozens of 2 to 3 inch bass cruising the banks. And with your typical spawn, if a bass lays 10,000 eggs, usually only about a dozen of them make it to reach adult size. Well, when you have a fall spawn, all of these 1 to 3 inch bass are hanging out in the shallow parts of the pond, but you all know that in the wintertime, the bigger bass and predators like to move out to the deeper water. So most of these bass fry didn't have any predators, and I think we had a much higher survival rate. Here you can see those little guys eating minnows and getting big quick. And then we followed up with our typical spawn in the springtime, and at that point I knew we had an abundance of juvenile bass, and now it's finally time to have to address the problem. So if you talk to any pond biologist, the number one mistake that all pond owners make is not harvesting enough bass out of the pond, and the bass become overpopulated, and there simply aren't enough resources in the pond to feed them all. So the first 2 years you typically don't have to do anything, and after the 3rd year, you need to start removing between 15 to 40 pounds per acre each year. And you always want to target those smaller fish because you haven't invested as many resources in them. So you don't want to remove the 3 and 4 and 5 pounders. But by taking out those smaller fish, it's less mouths to feed and less competition for those original fish you stocked. So we're going to start a new fish relocation program where several days throughout the year we catch as many small fish as we can and either give them away to you guys or to other people who are stocking their new ponds. And these fish still have those really aggressive tiger bass genetics. They just need a new pond to live in. So if you're interested in some of the juvenile bass out of the Crimson Oak Pond, make sure to reach out and I'll put you on the list, but we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. All right, it is time to start the culling process. We've got our holding tank filled up with pond water, a bubbler here, or aerator. One of the things I love most about these trucks, it has the 120 volt outlets. So you hit that power button and we've got plenty of bubbles to keep these little guys alive. Now we're going to be fishing with tiny baits because we're targeting the smallest fish in the pond. I'd prefer to catch all 3rd generation bass and remove those. There will be a little bit of a selection process. We'll get into that in a minute, but we're targeting those 12-inch fish or smaller. If we do catch any big ones, we'll scan them to see if they've been caught before in the past, and we may even install a pit tag in them. So in general, those 1st-year fish like to hang out in the shallow areas like the pockets and chase little bait fish and minnows right here on the bank. Got it. That's the ones we're looking for right there. That is the ideal cull fish right there. Hadn't taken many bait fish out of the pond. Get them while they're young. He's only 9 inches long. Now here's the thing, whenever you catch a small fish like this, that has pretty good girth to it and is much bigger, we'll go ahead and get a weight. Just for reference, this fish was probably born the same exact time and is already 13 inches. That's where the last one was like 9 or 10. So this is a nice female, not the type of fish you want to cull. So we put a tag in her, 2233163, and she weighs 1.12 pounds. Another good little coal. Little guy, scrappy. Another little coal bass, 12 inches. There's another one. So many of them in here. Little male, 11 inches. Got him. See, there's another good example of a coal fish. You see how long that fish is and skinny? Not been eating good or not good genetics. Something's wrong with it. You shouldn't see fish with a big old head and a little body. Another good coal. Oh, but it has been caught. So this bass was named Sean and was caught by one of Aquascape's crew back during the Cedar Falls pond build. And you can see even after we caught him again in 2025, there was no weight gain. So something's clearly wrong with this fish. So if you pay attention, folks, I've caught at least a dozen bass right here off this one tree. So that just goes to show you how many fish are in this entire pond right now, and the reason that I'm having to remove them. Look at all the different stumps out there. If there's a dozen fish on every marker you see, we've got way too many numbers. And so as I mentioned earlier, any of you that are interested in picking up some of these juvenile bass, send us a message. And our plan is to catch as many as you want, and we'll put them in this holding tank that can go right out in the pond, and we'll be able to keep them for a day or two until you show up. So I think it's a win-win. We help solve the problem with overpopulation in this pond and help get you some good genetics and tiger bass in yours. So our holding tank worked out good in this scenario. We transported 7 bass to a friend's pond and all showed up healthy and alive. But another reason you want to harvest a lot of the smaller fish is because if you're stocking them in your pond, it's best to put all the bass in there as close to the same size as possible because the last thing you want is a 5-pound bass eating all the smaller ones you added. So these were all a really good size, under 12 inches, with the one exception of Sean. So I think we had a good start to the harvesting program. Alright, now it's time to go check in on the fish in Cedar Falls. And the thing I love the most about this pond is the clear water, which gives us the ability to study these fish, because in here we have all 3 generations of the tiger bass. We have 1 first-generation bass named Tiger, 2 second-generation bass named Johnny and June, and 1 third-generation bass which was Johnny and June's offspring, and we named her Eve. And as we watch Eve here, it does seem like the 3rd-generation genetics are starting to become more and more aggressive. We also got some other additions, including the spotted bass with a big white spot on his head. But it's time for the weekly fish feeding. We have 1,000 golden shiners, and as these bass are starting to get bigger, we're also increasing the size of the shiners. They all know it's feeding time, staging right here off the dock. And it's always funny to watch them whenever I go to acclimate the shiners. But look who we've got eyeing them today, Smalley the smallmouth bass. And now that the spring weather's warming up, these bass are getting aggressive. Also putting on a lot of weight, and I'm expecting that we're going to be seeing some of them spawn here really soon. But one other thing I wanted to mention about harvesting fish out of your ponds is, first of all, you have to decide what you want your pond to be. And usually it's one of 2 things. You either have a trophy bass pond with fewer bass in it, but they get really big and can exceed 10 pounds, or you have what's known as a numbers pond, and you have a lot more bass in it, so each time you go out fishing, you're much more likely to catch a lot of fish. But the bass don't have as good of an opportunity to reach that 10-pound threshold. So after you've decided what type of pond you want, that'll help you gauge your harvest numbers. If you're looking for that trophy pond, you're probably going to be closer to 40 pounds per acre, and the numbers pond may be closer to 15 pounds per acre per year. But I know there's many of you pond owners out there that are thinking, well, I don't have a fish database, I don't know what my fish relative weights are, so how would I even get started? Well, one of the first things you can do is just give the fish the eyeball test. If they're short and stocky and have a lot of girth, your pond's probably in really good shape. If they're long and skinny, that's not a good sign. But if all else fails, you can always contact a fish biologist, and they come out to your pond to do what's called an electrofishing survey. And they'll calculate the relative weights for you and also give you some advice on your bait fish populations. But like I mentioned earlier, the number 1 reason for a pond's decline is overpopulation. And it's one of those problems that's much easier to attack in the beginning before things get out of hand. There's a fine view of Cedar Falls. But one thing I noticed is even after the snowstorm we had and that really cold winter, a couple of those tropical lilies survived. Got one other pot right over there, so I'll keep you guys updated. Nothing better than having a seat over here at Cedar Falls, listening to that waterfall right here at sunset. And Eve's not done snacking yet. So we recently laid sod in this area around the shop, and after all the snow, it's had a tough time getting going. So we're going to give it a kickstart with one of our long-term partners, Sunday. So the first thing I like about Sunday is their product selection. Not only do they have the lawn fertilizers, but they also carry bug repellents and even seeds for those dead spots. And the fertilizer application is extremely simple. I like using the water hose attachment, and you screw that into the top of the pouch, connect the water hose, and then you're ready to go. Then you just give it a nice even application across the lawn until the pouch is gone. Sunday works as a subscription service, and you start out by using the tools they give you to take a soil sample of the backyard, and you send that off to their experts, and based on your soil and climate, they'll send you back the exact mix of fertilizer you need to keep your yard looking great throughout the year. So Sunday takes all the guesswork out of it and make it extremely easy to use with these pouches that attach to your water hose. So do me a favor, folks, and head over to getsunday.com/BamaBass and get 25% off your first custom Sunday plan. And I'll be sure to follow up in a couple of weeks and show you the before and after results. There goes Romeo. But guys, check this out. I was just on top of the shop cleaning it off, and I heard the bald eagle chirping kind of right over there where Romeo's flying. And if you notice, right there, almost as plain as day, you can see an eagle nest right there, the big clump. There it is right there, just as plain as day. Can't believe I've never spotted it before. So obviously I don't want to go anywhere near the nest and disturb in case there's any baby eaglets in there, but I'm dying to know if there are. So I'm going to take this long range lens and climb up on top of the building, and I should have a clear shot to it. It's only a couple hundred yards over there. So this is ground level. I'm not on top of the building yet, and it looks like the mama's in there playing with some babies. Yep, I just saw a little baby pop up. So there is one little eaglet in there for sure. But when I got the footage back to my computer and started reviewing it, that's actually a baby eaglet right there in the center of the nest standing up. And if you look just to its left, there's another one laying down. That's a little harder to see, but every once in a while it'll flap its wing. But just looking at that one standing up, it probably ain't going to be too long before these little guys are ready to fly. I'm also pretty impressed with that eagle nest they built. Big and bulky right in the top of that pine. But how cool is that? The two bald eagles that are living here at the pond have had two babies. Gotta love it. So I got up on top of the building. The view wasn't as good. Too many limbs were in the way. But you can see Mama Eagle stopping by, checking in on the babies. I'm a little surprised at how flat the surface is. Not a lot of protection for the babies. And the Crimson Oak Pond has been full of bird activity this week. Take a look at who all's out there this morning. We got a couple cormorants. Not the type of birds we like seeing. We got Mama and Daddy Eagle over here, probably waiting on the bluegill feeders to go off. And then we got Mr. Longneck the white bird hanging out on top of the eagle tower. And let's watch them as they fly down and try to snag one of the fish to feed the babies. But if you guys watched the last video, we had a really interesting opportunity come up, as a doctor and a wildlife biologist out of Mississippi State invited us to join their eagle tagging program. And when they first sent the email, I was on the fence, so I asked you all what you thought about it. And in the comment section, it was almost an exact 50-50 split. And in fact, it was so close that we even added a poll that you guys could vote on. And out of 12,000 votes, it was still an exact 50-50 split. And trust me guys, I understand both sides and viewpoints. There were many people that didn't want to see the eagles touched at all, and had fears that the GPS tracker would hinder the eagle's ability to clean itself or fly, which are all valid concerns, and their vote was no, leave them alone. And then the other 50% supported the research and knowledge gained out of these studies. And this was far too controversial of a topic for this channel. If you've watched this channel at all in the past several years, we prefer it to be zero controversy, drama, but we'd rather focus on building ponds and raising fish, and creating habitats to help the wildlife out. So we're not going to be tagging any bird species at the 5-acre pond. But the one thing I will say in defense of the people who support it is you can't always just leave eagles alone. And that's because unfortunately mankind can harm animals like the bald eagles, and it wasn't too long ago that we used a pesticide called DDT that led to the eagles being put on the endangered list due to the eagle eggs thinning and not being able to hatch. But due to the research and conservation efforts by the wildlife biologist, the bald eagles are back thriving today. So a big shout out to those guys for help keeping this majestic bird around so it can snag little bluegills out of our pond. And if you missed the video a few weeks back, the two ducks we call Echo and Romeo finally started using the duck house we built for them a couple years ago. And when I stopped by to check it out the other day, if you look really closely, you'll see some duck eggs in there. And at first I got really excited thinking we may have some baby ducks out here at the pond, but as I got a closer look, it looked more like something got to the eggs. If I had to guess, it was probably a raccoon, and it's just unfortunate that the duck house was sitting in the one shallow pocket of the pond that the raccoons can access. So the duck house floats. I think we're going to move it out of that pocket, out to some deeper water, and potentially even anchor it down and try to help the ducks out. But as you can see, they have not a care in the world. They're just bobbing up and down, looking for that next meal. And only a couple days after that, I had to do a double take as I saw a few more ducks arrive in the pond. But those are not baby ducks. They're a different species than the mallard. Those are diving ducks, not 100% sure what type. I'm sure some of you guys can identify them down in the comment section below. But Romeo and Echo were happy to have some new life show up in the pond. Now it's time to check in on the backyard pond where we're doing our spring cleaning. We got Mr. Oliver here helping us. He throws leaves in the pond just so he can scoop them back out. But we've already cut back a lot of last year's growth and are cleaning up the pond's edge. You can tell the waterfall's still clogged up a little bit as we're not getting that full water flow. But we got that cleaned out, much better flow rate now. And coming back here brings back so many memories. This is where it all got started back in 2018, where we built our first ever pond with aquascape. It's like a miniature version of Cedar Falls, and home of Moby, the most aggressive bass in the world. You can see we got him and the big crappie we call Outlaw sitting down there on the bottom. We've still got to do the second part of cleaning, and that's everything under the water. But happy to see Moby's doing good, and we're going to show you some underwater clips in our next video, but just to give you a quick sneak peek, Mr. Moby spent all winter eating and has gotten big. More of that coming up next week. Now it's time to head over and get an update on the shop build. So we finished up with the rough end stage, and next up is the spray foam. But check out this guy's setup. 10 out of 10 for organization. There's several things in there I have no idea what it is. As you can see, we've got the spray foam hose piped in over here to his trailer, and that looks like one of the controllers. But the guys are on the inside getting everything taped off that's not going to get sprayed. And this guy's getting started with the spraying. It's definitely putting off some Breaking Bad vibes. But I personally love watching the spray foam application. It starts out in a liquid form, and then within seconds fluffs out and hardens. That's pretty cool. But the guy taping everything up to protect it had a full-time job with these tall ceilings and garage doors. If you hadn't ever seen closed cell spray foam, here's a good look at it. As I mentioned, it hardens right away. And if you look at it over here from the side angle, it expands out about 2 inches, which seals everything off and makes it like a cooler inside of here. Now he's got the walls completed and he's working on the ceilings. And one reason spray foam is the way to go on a shop, if you pay close attention to that pink area, he added a little bit of your standard insulation in there, right in the gap that was created by the lean-to of the shop. And now he's coming back and spray foaming over the top of it, which completely seals everything off from the outside area. And if you look at the finished product right there on the right, it doesn't look bad at all. So if you're not covering your ceilings like most people don't do in a shop, spray foam is the way to go. But the one issue with spray foam is that over time, especially if it has any contact with sunlight, it turns that really ugly yellow color. So we're coming back over and spray painting everything white. A lot of people also prefer black, and we were 50-50 with it. But since everything else in the shop was white, we decided to just make everything blend together. And I think it turned out really good. The one thing I didn't want was contrasting colors with metal beams, a different colored ductwork, and spray foam. So now that they're all white, everything blends perfect. And we also got our Crimson Oak logo sign in this week, made of the heavier gauge steel. So we're going to be mounting that. The one issue we're contemplating is using LED strip lights versus standard lights. More on that next week. And this is my favorite time of the year because as the temperatures start getting warmer in the spring, all the fish move out of those deep wintertime holes into the shallow parts of the pond as they start getting ready to spawn. And that's the time of year we have what I call controlled chaos. As these feeders go off, you'll start to see the bass chasing the bluegills, and you're going to see a few clips where they knock them a few feet up into the air, and the bluegills are doing spinning somersaults. But as I've mentioned in the past, these bass have never targeted too heavily on the bluegills. This seems to be the one time of the year they do it the most, and that's because we don't have the tilapia or prawns in here this time of year. And that's why they call the bluegills the backbone of the pond, because they're here throughout the year and are always a good food source when the bass need it. Man, look at that. That is incredible. We've got flying bluegills out here today. There's another good close-up of what looks like a shark emerging out of the water. But I had to watch this one a second time in slow-mo because it almost looks like the bass knocks the bait fish in the air and then tracks it while it's in the air until it lands. Maybe that's just a coincidence, but he followed the path perfectly. The bass aren't the only ones that are hungry. It makes more sense now why the eagles are always here, because they've got a couple extra mouths to feed. But I'll be interested to see how long those baby eaglets stay around, because I think that the nesting season for eagles starts in November, so those babies may be getting really close to flying by now. But man, it is so cool to see the two babies, and I would have loved to have had it right there in the Eagle Tower so we could put up a 24-hour live stream. But I'm pretty sure the eagles wanted some more privacy, but they also stayed just close enough to have a good food source, and I'm happy to know that the fish in this pond are helping support a new family of eagles. But there's signs of spring and new life all around the 5-acre pond this week, as little Peter Cottontail had a baby. We picked the cute little guy up for just a minute to inspect him, then hid him back over on the wood line so the eagles didn't grab him. Now let's check in on the swamp cameras. Something's got everything stirred up down there. Probably this buck, and you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but the bucks are still rutting down here in South Alabama. You'll see some more evidence of that here in just a second. We got a family of raccoons out roaming the creek. And another Mr. Buck Deer looking for a doe. And you can watch as this buck crosses the creek. You can tell he's been running a lot. The way he's walking even looks like he's sore and needs some rest. Hey, there's Peter Cottontail, the daddy rabbit. And the raccoons down in the creek trying to catch a crawfish. I think Mr. Buck Deer's on to us. He knows something's not right here. Alright, time to do a little fishing and show you all of the bigger bass that we caught earlier while we were doing our culling process. Big ones only that either got tagged or already had a tag. Oh, a little bigger one. Oh yeah. Oh, look at there, we got some spawning action. Female spawning right there in that bank. Alright, this fish has been caught, 570325, and it weighs 2.29 pounds and is 16 inches long. And this fish is named Hercules. We last caught it back in June of 23. Relative weight almost exactly the same at 102%. Big one. This is a lot of fun. Got him. Big spawning female. This one's 570000. I'm pretty sure I caught this fish last week, and it weighs 2.44. I'm almost certain that this is Apollo, the very first fish we ever caught. I was right. This is the first fish that we ever tagged named Apollo, and I just talked about this fish in the last video. Every single time we had ever caught an Apollo was directly in front of the dock, and I went back and watched the video of the old catches. If you ever made this specific cast, you were going to catch Apollo. And he completely threw everybody a curveball and swam to the other side of the pond. Big and oh yeah. I'm gonna have to take our time with this one. Wow, what a fish. Look at that. Man, what a beauty. Man, that's a nice fish. And this one's 571185, weighing in 3.28 pounds. Biggest one of the day, and 18 inches. Man, what a beautiful fish. This fish is named Guppy. It's the 4th time we've caught her. She's putting on some good weight. Almost gained a pound since last July. Wow. Another good one. Oh yeah. Nice. Man. Back to back giant beautiful fish. Alright, this one's 571094 and weighs 3.10 pounds. And this is the man himself, Van Dam. It's the 4th time we've caught him, and that relative weight's at 114%, which is good. Now let's take a look at the Bonnie's Bayou cam. Romeo and Echo hanging out after hours tonight. And the eagle pouncing. And we had a big storm come through and even blew the lid to the duck house open. Yeah, fight between the long necks. The blue heron and the egret. The Battle of Bonnie's Bayou. Alright, now let's go check in on the squirrel house. There's been a lot of commotion in here over the past month, but you can see Gus Gus is back in here trying to build a nest. And they've been cleaning out some of the furniture, which is making it an obstacle bringing that nesting material in. And then Chip shows up and says, "What in the world is going on here? Who's moving all the furniture around?" He hops in the bed and then inspects the back entrance of the window. Hey, we even got a little surprise visit from Gus Jr., just hopping in the bed to sleep for one night. And Chip coming in through the window entrance. Oh no, I think all of our furniture is going to be gone here in a week or two. He's out of here. And we got Gus Gus getting a little worried with this storm coming through tonight. And oh, he finally did it. Gus Gus knocked the kitchen table over. Looks like I'm going to have to get in the squirrel house and do some spring cleaning there too. So if you missed this video last fall, we had some friends give us a bucket full of sawtooth acorns, and we fed half of them to the deer and kept half of them to grow new trees from. We put them in a Ziploc bag and put them in the refrigerator to simulate the winter months. Now let's see how they turned out. Alright, now for the moment of truth. I kept them in the refrigerator in this plastic bag with moist paper towels on it. And let's see what the final results are. Check that out, it worked. They're sprouting, that's the base of the acorn, that's the top, or what they call the shell end. But now the plan is to plant them in these small containers, and you can either plant acorns sideways on their side like that, because what's going to happen is the taproot's going to come out and grow down, and the main trunk of the tree is going to branch off and grow up. And out in nature, as they fall off trees, they fall in every position, but you can see with a longer acorn like this, typically they're going to land on their sides. So we're going to start like that. You could plant them with that root going down. There's nothing wrong with that. The one thing you don't want to do is plant them like that. The next thing is that oaks prefer soft, sandy soil that helps those roots get established. Just going to plant these guys about 1 inch deep. Add about 1 to 2 inches of soil over the top of them. But the best thing about sawtooth oak trees are they are one of the fastest growing oaks and also produce acorns faster than any other oak. So the wildlife absolutely love them. Now the last thing I'm going to do is add just a little bit of potting soil mix and just a real thin layer of it right here to the top. That has some good stuff mixed in it that'll help them grow a little faster. And now speaking of oak trees, this is the time of year I like to fertilize all the trees that we've planted out here. And the trick is using a controlled release fertilizer. With trees, you don't want to hit them with a lot of fertilizer all at once. So the trickle effect on this type of fertilizer does really good, especially for oak trees. And these guys on the edge of the pond are doing great. However, the oak on Alcatraz Island needs some fertilizer. But it's pretty simple. The first thing you do is look at the canopy of the tree, and you want to spread the fertilizer in a circle just outside of the perimeter of the limbs. So obviously the bigger the tree, the bigger the circle of fertilizer. And that's going to keep those roots growing outwards, which will make the tree grow taller. This is also the time of the year we clip any of the troubled branches. We have a lot of deer hooking them with their antlers, so this is going to help the trees out. Just finishing up fertilizing this long row of Nuttall oaks. And look at there, some of these guys are getting so big they're busting out of their protective covers. And another cocoon up on the top of this one. Alright, we made it out here to Alcatraz Island, and you can tell that the quality of the oak out here and the growth it's put on is not even comparable. A lot of that probably has to do with the clay soil that we planted it in. So we're going to fertilize it today. We're also going to plant some wildflower seeds, which will hopefully attract some hummingbirds and other species. And the oak throne sign got knocked off in one of the recent storms, so we got to mount that guy back. We got little Oliver up here, giving me his best smile, so I'll take him out in the boat again. But Sarah and Oliver over here planting some sunflowers around Mama's garden. Mama's going to be happy to see him here in a few months. And you can tell we got a little worker bee on our hands. Oliver's determined to spread some of these seeds out today. And after that, he headed out with his net out to the dock to catch a fish. He's growing up fast, and I love seeing his passion for these projects we've created out here. So if you listen closely, you'll hear this buck grunting and chasing these does off. And then take a look at the date stamp, February 27th. That's probably the latest I've ever seen deer rutting, but it's been multiple bucks coming through, and even a lot of bucks that we haven't seen before. But this was a nice buck, and probably one of the nicest ones we've seen all year. And he just showed up, but he's got a really interesting kicker off of his left side. It almost looks like at one point he started a drop tine there, and it may have gotten broken off fighting. But more buck daytime footage here in March. And it's no surprise why all the bucks are showing up, because there is no shortage of does out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. We got the whole gang showing up today. There's another new little buck showing up. Hadn't seen him at all this year. And there he is, chasing a doe on March the 1st. That's wild. But it's also interesting to see the bucks that survived the hunting season. This is a 10-point that's been a regular all year. Nice to see he made it. Alright, if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all of our pond builds and wildlife out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. But I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and we will see you all next time.